Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Fulcrum Intel Digest Podcast. My name is Cara and I'm an intelligence analyst at Fulcrum Intel Digest. And today I am joined by my friend and colleague and just overall cool person, Jenna Dolecek. Jenna, I'm so happy that you can appear on our podcast. This is really great. And I always love chatting to you, and I'm very excited to get into today's topic. How are things going with you, Jenna? Do you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I always love our talks. So I've been in open source investigation for about 10 years, mostly in the human rights and war crimes space, working for the United Nations, with Ukrainian authorities and a bunch of NGOs. But it wasn't until I was 30 that I learned that I had ADHD.
Wow. Yeah, women and girls do tend to be diagnosed in our later years. That is a great way to segue into today's topic. So, Jenna, we're going to talk about neurodiversity in intelligence. Do you want to give us just an overview? What does it mean to say neurodivergent or neurotypical, and how does it apply to intelligence?
Yeah, so neurodivergent actually isn't a medical term. It's just kind of this word that we've been using rather than describing people as like normal or abnormal. So there's, no single definition for kind of how the human brain is supposed to work. So like the National Institute of Health says that neurodiversity, describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in different ways. And there's no right or wrong way of thinking and learning, and differences aren't deficits. So, referring to somebody as neurodivergent is a way to focus on the positive aspects and kind of, respect that we all have these kind of cognitive differences. And the Cleveland Clinic also kind of describes it as just brains that work different. We have different strengths and challenges. And that can also include, other things besides ADHD, but like learning disabilities and other conditions. So yeah, it's just kind of a way to describe us in a more respectful manner.
Brilliant. I love that. I think that's a very, very nice way to refer to people. So I will say that, Jenna, I used to feel bad when I was younger, like in my late teens, my early 20s. I felt for a long time like I didn't belong in the neurotypical world. And, after I finished my master's, I did a master's in terrorism studies. And after that, I got into the open source Intel world. And suddenly I felt like I belong. I felt like people understood me. No one judged me for doing things that they thought was weird in the workplace. Whereas I was like, well, of course, this is how something should work. This is the more organized way, So it's not to say that neurodivergent people are better or worse than neurotypical people. I just have found that I have less anxiety because I've found a place where I belong. And that kind of means that I've been more successful because I'm now in a place where I feel comfortable. And as a result of that success, that then creates a positive feedback loop where I have less anxiety just because I fit in a workplace where I feel like I belong. I don't know if you've had a similar experience, with ADHD. Do you feel like you belong and maybe that your skills are valued a bit more maybe in the Intel industry than other places?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think the type of work really fits with my interests, my strengths. When it comes to my skills or my working style, I definitely felt like other work. I used to be a paralegal for an immigration attorney, and I hated it. It was basically glorified, just paperwork and data entry. And so it was only when I got to work on the research part for asylum that I, was actually interested. But otherwise, I just my brain just hated that type of work and work style. So, they do say that people with neurodiversity can be better at things like pattern recognition, nonlinear thinking, problem solving. We create more logical systems. We can be better at anticipating threats. And many of us perform better under pressure, making us good at roles like within intelligence or investigation where we have tight deadlines, rapid response tasks. But that doesn't mean neurotypical people aren't good at those things or can't be good at those things. Or like you said, that, we're just naturally better. we all have these differences. So it's important to, not make these blanket statements. There's always exceptions to the rule. But I have noticed in myself, and compared to my non-ADHD colleagues, that there are certain things that I'm faster on. I am better under pressure. I might notice certain things that they don't. The systems I create tend to be a little more logical and streamlined. But again, that doesn't mean that what I do is best or that it can't be made better. There were times my colleagues did things and I was like, oh my God, duh, that makes so much more sense. But then there'd be times, I would ask questions or follow a line of inquiry or connect dots that my colleagues never noticed.
No, for sure. Another trait that's often spoken about in intelligence circles with people that are neurodivergent is this ability slash thing that bothers you called hyperfocus, right? So this is the ability to really, really almost be very obsessive about like getting your report perfect, getting all the data as streamlined as it can be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've noticed this trend in the industry, especially in conflict monitoring, which also, I guess, adds motivation for analysts to hyper focus in a way, because you're working in the justice sector, which feeds the hyper focus because we want to make it right. We have this. I've noticed that neurodivergent individuals have this drive to we see the things that are unjust and we want to fix that in the world, right? That's why you're a conflict monitor. Yeah. But this does lead to things like hyper focus, where you sit and you work, but it feels it feels like you've been working for 2 minutes and you look up and it's been 6 hours, you haven't eaten, you haven't had any water, and you're like, why am I feeling so weak? And it's because you were hyper focused. And that maybe means that your report was finished, in like 2 days before the deadline, but it can also be negative. What are your thoughts on hyperfocus?
Yeah, I think we do see it in terms of a good thing, right? We can do a lot of work in a short amount of time, but it can also be a bad thing too. It can lead to subpar work because maybe we skipped things, or miss certain details or something. So we can make more mistakes that way. And like you said, it can also cause us to focus on one thing over another or ignore other things that are just as important. So it's a super fine line. And I'm sure we've all realized we crossed it when it was too late. But like you said, some of us forget to drink. We don't get up to go to the bathroom. We don't get up to move or deal with other things that need our attention. I've noticed that I hate being interrupted because I don't want to lose my spot that I'm working on or forget something. Like when you're in the zone, you hate to be interrupted. But this, like you said, can cause us to lose hours of time. So it's not really good for us physically or mentally. Or if we have multiple tasks, maybe we want to focus on one and we don't want to stop to work on the other, or, struggle with juggling tasks and deadlines. So, some of us may approach things as like doing all the small, easy tasks first or tackling the hardest first. But it also kind of coincides with time blindness, which is where we process time differently. So like you said, it felt like it was 2 minutes, but you're like, oh my God, it's been 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Your family member wanders in, do you want some coffee? So this actually brings me to the next point that I was just thinking about, is that this speaks a little bit to us wanting the perfect process, right? By us, I mean neurodivergent Intel analysts. We definitely have a process most of the time. It's either brought to you directly by your boss, it's an institutional way of doing things, and you just have to fall into that. Or sometimes you're a little bit allowed to, streamline your own process. And I think that both of those can be useful to neurodivergent individuals in intelligence, because you have a workflow. It's just that sometimes someone else's workflow might not work for you. So, and sometimes I've noticed, like when I might be in an assignment where I feel like I can't change the workflow because I'm not in the position of power to change it. But what's been interesting is sometimes to see how different neurodivergent individuals will have the same experience. And when more than 1 or 2 or 3 people tell the boss, listen here, I can't work like this, you actually end up making it better for a lot of people, because neurodivergence is so common. It's probably very common in any Intel team. just because, this has been my experience of how I've experienced the intelligence world. Do you agree with that? Do you like a process? I know that you're very, I remember when you told me you worked at the UN that you streamlined some of their processes. What was that like?
Yeah, that was actually the very first project I was given on like day 3 was to kind of look at their monitoring process and see what could be changed or improved. And I looked at our either kind of the main spreadsheet or other people's spreadsheets because individual kind of analysts and other colleagues would monitor a particular kind of region. And so everybody did their own monitoring. And so I kind of looked at everybody's spreadsheets and nearly had a stroke because data was all over the place. It wasn't organized. It was just kind of a mess. But I mean, not everybody's taught how to kind of organize information in that way if you've never kind of done it formally. So if you're just handed that, you just do it, to the best of your ability. And people were also so busy with a ton of other work. So yeah, not only was it a mess, they also weren't up to date because they didn't have enough time because we had so much to work on. So it was even pretty out of date. So what I did was I got us access to databases of other organizations who monitor full time and have a thorough methodology. That's all they do. So I got a hold of those and I did some sample testing. So I was looking at, what events were being documented, how they were being documented, such as, what information did it capture, and then see if it was being done more frequently. And it definitely was, they were daily monitors. And so we didn't have that capacity. So I presented my findings and I recommended that we just stop monitoring entirely because everywhere else was doing it better. So I brought all of those together. And that freed us up to then monitor things that weren't really being looked at, like sexual violence. A lot of neurodiverse people like efficiency. We hate wasting time and resources or doing things that are unnecessary or having to do it again because it wasn't done right the first time. So I think it's a very good skill for us to have to see where things can be made more efficient, but some workplaces aren't really open to suggestions sometimes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is a big problem that I've encountered. And then it just really makes everyone's lives harder. Like, I try, when I am in the fortunate position to lead teams of investigators, I really try to apply what I've learned in my own life and try not to repeat the mistakes of people that I have worked with in the past, to where maybe everyone was suffering under the managerial style, but the neurodivergent ones are often the ones who speak up because perhaps they have more confidence, perhaps they are more likely to take care of their mental health, which means that they have more tools to actually communicate effectively with their supervisors and stuff like that. So, there's so many interesting things we can talk about, Jenna, but I am going to talk about next and focus on this idea of a conducive work environment, because I personally have found that it can be so tough to work in intelligence as a neurodivergent person where nobody tries to change your environment for you. Like, for example, you'll be stuffed into a cramped office where it's hot and noisy. And I would find myself reading the same paragraph 4 times before even being able to process what was the information in it, because I just literally can't focus if I'm hot and uncomfortable and it's just, and that is definitely a neurodivergent trait. Like, I've noticed the neurotypical people in my teams often noted, and they were like, "Oh, Cara, are you really that cold?" Because I would be sitting there with a scarf in summer but because we have the aircon on, it would be freezing to me and I would be like, "Oh, just leave me alone," So there are also, I think, ways that we can improve. Like, I think remote work, for example, has made it easier, in my opinion, for neurodiverse individuals in intelligence to actually work efficiently. I don't know what you think about this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think remote work has changed some of our lives, without sacrificing productivity. I think most of us, or many of us, become more productive because we're in an environment that is conducive to how we work. and finally accommodates us. Like you said, we struggle being cramped in offices with lots of noise, distractions, other sensory challenges, or some people have physical disabilities that make it difficult to come in and work in an office. I think it also goes along with, we hate meetings that could have been emails. We hate having to waste our time with commuting. I don't like being told I have to be somewhere from this hour to this hour, no exception. So I think, being more comfortable, having less physical pain, which takes time out of our day. And, that also impacts the quality of our work. So we get more sleep without having to commute. We can, have more time to take care of ourselves physically and mentally. The Autism Society even did a study on work environment and how important it is for neurodiverse individuals, which includes things like, the type of, fluorescent lights. I think we all hate overhead fluorescent lighting.
That is the,
yes.
I hate that. I hate feeling like I'm in a hospital. Like,
right.
No, don't shine a light in my eye.
Yeah. I have worked for several organizations that did have policies of like no perfumes or colognes because smells can affect us. When I worked at the UN, we were actually all given noise canceling headphones because we all had to share an office with each other. So we all wore headphones all the time, things like that. So yeah, there's definitely things that workplaces can be done to accommodate, their employees and help us work better, which improves our work and our productivity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think by the time our generation is in managerial positions, that this will all be taken into account, by a generation who was kind of brought up to really respect the issues of mental health and to become a bit more aware of it. So I do think that it will change and improve even more with time. Like, to be honest, when you just told me they gave you noise cancelling headphones, but you must all be in the office, it almost makes me think, what's the point of being in the office then?
Right.
People can go on about, you've got to be social and stuff, but
yeah,
to me that just points out that nobody likes sitting in a big crowded office. But what do I know? But these things are important to take into account. So it's something else I've noticed, and that you and I have spoken about already, is this idea of our work being either repetitive or containing variety in this. So, for example, in conflict monitoring, I noticed that the people who work in the field of intel and conflict monitoring specifically, is the work isn't necessarily repetitive, but the day-to-day tasks are. Like, every day you log on, you do your monitoring, you fill in your spreadsheet, you let your superiors know what the daily brief is, and then you that's your day and you come back tomorrow. But the context is different. So you kind of find this. I feel like neurodivergent individuals, in my experience in conflict monitoring, are drawn to this job because you have the best of both worlds. You get to, which is something I like. I like repetition. I like things go in this, I'm one of those people who likes having to do the same thing every day because then I know what's expected of me. But that doesn't mean that the work was boring. Like, every day something different would happen and we would have something new to investigate. So in that way, I feel like I had the best of both worlds. And I've spoken to other people who agree that this is quite nice and that they've noticed that conflict monitoring is an industry that draws neurodivergent people. So I don't know about you, whether you like repetition or variety. What's your preference?
I did think it was interesting how you said your job, you kind of get both, whereas like the system or the workflow is repetitive, but the information you're presented with, the investigation or something, that's what has more variety. So yeah, you kind of get both. And I hadn't really thought about it like that before. But I think for me, especially the way I work, I like variety. Whenever I was in positions where it was very repetitive, kind of like the paralegal thing, just filling out paperwork constantly, that just I was just ground down and very bored. And, or when I did monitoring, at the beginning, it's very interesting. It's new. But then after, a year, you're like, okay, I need to do something else. But that's just how my brain works. But in research, analysis, or investigation, it is always something different. And so my brain, whether it's a different country, a different conflict, a different topic, it's all different. And so, I do like discovery. But I also really love geospatial analysis. And somebody could call this repetitive. You know, I could stare at satellite imagery literally all day.
I know this about you. I know you love a geolocation. If it can be geolocated, you will be there.
Right. So yeah, and there's different ways to kind of bring in that variety. So like I've been kind of consulting and working on different projects, which I really like because I can choose what I want to work on. But then I can, work on different things. I don't have to accept the same things, or I can work on something in the legal capacity or in the investigation capacity or kind of geospatial analysis capacity. So even that variety really helps me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the variety of OSINT in general these days is there's so much we can do. And I think that variety is also what draws people who don't necessarily want what I want to call neurotypical jobs, like I want to say something like accounting, or I was going to say law, but then look at you. So I don't know, but you know what I mean. Well, there we go. Let's use your paralegal job as an example, right? That was maybe more suited to neurotypical people, but to each their own. And the last part of our podcast, Jenna, I want to talk a bit about the interpersonal I'm going to say struggles, because for me as a neurodivergent person and people I've spoken to, sometimes it's so hard to just get along with people. And also this is probably because neurodivergent people react differently to the way that neurotypical people do to both the workplace and the stimuli in it, which includes people. And my takeaway from all of this is just that I do think that society becomes more aware of both the pros and cons of working with neurodivergent people, which is where the interpersonalness of it comes in. I've experienced that in the Intel world, people are generally open to finding ways to support their neurodivergent employees. And that just makes me so happy, because I do think that the Intel industry is such a nice industry to be in that aspect, and in that if you're viewing it like that. I don't know what you think, Jenna. What has your experience been?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways interpersonal stuff can come along with neurodiversity. I was really lucky at the UN. My supervisor, she was also pretty neurodiverse, and so she understood me and how I worked, and we worked very well together. And we were both very open when it came to the rest of our teammates, if they needed some sort of accommodation. But then I've worked at places where it was the exact opposite, and it was either fit in or struggle, basically.
Do or die.
I've really I struggle with unquestionable authority, rigid hierarchy, hard rules. So organizations where policies are very black letter and there's like no flexibility or understanding is very difficult for me. I've worked at places where they refuse to change, get with the times, or even just generally improve things. And I'm just like, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. People can be very cold and uncaring. And, seeing how my colleagues were treated at certain places made me very angry and disappointed and disillusioned. But I've also learned that that's because we have a very strong sense of justice. So we don't like it when, we're treated unfairly, or our colleagues are treated unfairly. And especially when it's such an easy thing that can be changed. That's what I struggled with the most. And they just refuse to do it because, this is how things have always been done.
This is how we've always done it. Yeah.
Yeah. But therapy has helped me learn how to kind of control that sense of injustice and allocate my emotional resources better, and understand that, we don't live in a world made for us, basically.
Yeah, no, that's true. Absolutely. I do think therapy has so many benefits, and everyone should do it at least once.
Absolutely.
And on that very positive note, Jenna, I'm going to say my big thanks to you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I am so sure we will speak again very soon about a very interesting topic, just as this one was. Big thanks from the team at Fulcrum. Thank you, Jenna. It's such a pleasure. Any parting thoughts or just goodbyes? And we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
I think it's important that, whether you see yourself as neurodiverse or neurotypical or whatever, we all have strengths and weaknesses that are all complementary. And so I think as long as we're just all open and understanding and flexible, I think that'll make our workplaces much better. And like you said, with our generation being very aware of these things, I think this will change more for the better as time goes on. But yeah, I thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely wonderful. Like I said, I love our talks. So.
Me too, Jenna. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenna. We'll speak soon. And thank you to everyone for listening, and look out for the next podcast. Cheers.